Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hello, folks. We're glad you're joining us today. Thank you. We appreciate that. You must have an interest in the nuggets of history in the past, which of the 1950s, which Jackie and I certainly do because of the book we wrote, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. Today, we're taking you on a little journey within that book. What actually happened on our farm in the 1950s? Well, perhaps our story is your story, and we certainly want you to comment and have fun watching, and maybe you will even recall some special times in your life of the 1950s when you were living on your farm, on your family's farm. So come with us, join us, take a trip with us. And I do want to start out by showing you this picture, and I'm going to enlarge the screen so you can see the picture a lot better. This was our family farm. And actually, this picture was taken in about 1974. But that's the wonderful place where Jackie and I grew up. And our home, let me see, is right over here, somewhere up there, right there. It was built in 1952, and so many other buildings that we have special memories of, fond memories, you might say, from the 1950s. So let's start off by talking about a few glimpses of our day that we found in our book. Now, sometimes we'll even allow the windmill to talk. You know, that windmill does play a part in our book. But let's start because that windmill has lots of knowledge of, you might say it grew up in the 1950s too. Wouldn't you think that, Jackie?
Yes, ma'am. It grew up with us.
Yes. And we use the windmill in the book as a character, as one of the people who can tell you about rural life in the 1950s. We call it the sage observer of time because it was so tall and it could see the changes in our family, how Jackie and I grew and what we did throughout those 10 years of the 1950s. The changes in our small farming community of Menoken, North Dakota, which is 10 miles east of Bismarck. And then, of course, we allow it to see and have put on great glasses to see all over the state of North Dakota and the rural countryside, just to see the changes that occurred in those 10 years of the 1950s. So anyway, we're going to divide this chat today into three different times of day. And most of these, that what we'll be reading or what we'll be talking about would be occurrences that we probably had in the summertime or a day when we would have been home from school. Outside chores, my goodness. We were busy outside. And I need to show you where this chicken house is because we spent a lot of time in that, dude. Let's see if I can get it up close. And you tell me, Jackie, where I'm.
Okay, raise it higher, yes. And then put your fingers below. Would that be easier for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
I think it would. There we go. Okay, the chicken house was right over there. So we had a little jaunt, not too far to go from our house to the chicken house. And I think, didn't Grandpa and Dad build that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. They also built the garage, which is the building closest to the house, a big garage.
Yes. And it was very handy to have a garage because otherwise we didn't have any cover for our tractors or our car or our truck. Mm-hmm. And so in that chicken house, I mentioned we spent a lot of time. Jackie, did you have a favorite part being in that chicken house?
Did I have a favorite part? Well, let me just tell you, I'm going to read from our book, page 131, just a little glimpse of something. Our family cleaned the chicken house weekly on a Saturday morning. It was especially difficult for me to rise and shine, especially in the winter, on Saturday morning. So Dad would let me sleep until 8:30, And then he'd come to my bedroom and he'd softly say, "Here, chicky, 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 chicky." A few minutes later, he'd patiently repeat it. Then it would progress to "Time to get up, Jackie." I'd stay in bed until the last possible second, knowing that by 9 o'clock, I'd be in the chicken house, slinging the manure into the manure spreader with the rest of the family. It was quite a bonding experience.
Yep, it really was. To me, the most fun was getting on the manure spreader and on that seat on the manure spreader, and then having Dad to drive the tractor and pull that manure spreader out to the pasture where we spread that composting, you might say, or we did want it to compost. But you know what, for me, was the most fun about that chicken house was when we would put down fresh straw. And the chickens were so happy. I could still hear them going, caw, 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 caw. Yeah. And then they'd scratch through the straw. And that was the fun part. Truly, for me anyway, it was a feeling of self-satisfaction knowing that we were making the chickens happy and hopefully they laid better eggs.
Right.
That just happened to be one part that stood out for me. One of our viewers had any experiences like that? You know, I think most young kids on the farm had to do something with chickens, whether it was feeding them or helping with the butchering process or
Gathering eggs.
Yep. That was the income for our family, for our grocery money, and I think money for the chickens from the eggs, because Dad had an egg route in Bismarck. I think that money was also used to help pay for your dance lessons, our piano lessons, just little extra things. So it really was beneficial for us. And then
I'd like to insert right now that, you know, many of you who have read the book and are going to read the book were not raised on a farm. And so you may be surprised, as one of my friends said, "Oh, I didn't know that happened on the farm." So it is an educational book of rural America, whether you grew up in rural America or not. That's my 2 cents.
That's correct. Okay, so moving on from being outside to doing chores, most often Mom would be baking. She would be making loaves and loaves of bread because we only had homemade bread. She made caramel rolls and she made cherry pie for Dad. He loved cherry pie. We ate a lot of freshly baked bread. But let me tell you something, because it was such a treat for me when we were able to buy a loaf of bread because it had such a different texture to it. And I really enjoyed that. But I think too, because of Mom's bread baking skills, that's why I became a bread baker, at least for a while. And it was really fun to get my hands in that dough and to knead the dough. And I often, in retrospect, when I was kneading dough, her picture would come into my mind as how she stood at that breadboard and kneaded the dough back and forth to make all those loaves of bread.
And she made 6 loaves a week.
And we'd go through them.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Do you remember when we'd come home from school and she would have pulled loaves out of the oven about that time? And oh my goodness, we would sit down and we'd take that bread knife and we'd slice the loaf of bread and slather it with butter. That was the best treat, you might say.
And then another treat would be the fried bread called in German Kuechle. And that'd be one whole loaf that she didn't make into amount of dough that she didn't make into a loaf. And so she'd deep fry that, and then we would eat it right away, dip it into maple syrup. It was heaven.
I know, and I could never figure out why she'd limit us to one loaf.
Well,
that was being kind of cruel. Yes, and sometimes she was pretty stingy with that. She didn't want to make Kuechle. She would rather have baked those loaves of bread, and perhaps she had a reason for it. I don't know, something going on the next week, but she knew what was best. You know what? One thing too I remember about caramel rolls. Oh, jeepers. Dad liked raisins. And at that point in my life, I did not care for raisins. But she would always put raisins in the brown sugar mixture before she rolled up the dough to make slices of caramel rolls. But I think when many families then in the 50s and even now, if someone bakes something, it's often what the husband will like or the breadwinner will like.
Mm-hmm.
And that is another reason why mom rarely made chocolate cake, because dad didn't like it. But she loved it.
Except German chocolate cake. He liked
Yes,
that.
that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, mom baked for those she loved. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an outlet for homemakers at that time to be able to have contact with a professional homemaker, either the home extension agent in the county, or what I remember most, at 10:30 in the morning on KFYR radio for a half hour of time, it was Martha Bolson was a home economist, and I believe she was out of Nebraska, but she would bring good neighboring news, and she would give ideas for recipes, for cleaning the home, for sewing, for making a pretty picture. She was the arm reaching out to the 1950s homemaker who might not have had much access away from the farm. And of course, in the 50s, especially the early 50s, women stayed on the farm. That their castle was their home, and so they made it to be the best that it could be in their eyes. And sometimes it was in baking and cooking. Sometimes it was in decorating. Some just in cleaning. Everyone had a clean house, that's for sure, or tried to at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we also, in the morning, before it got too hot, we would help in the gardening. And that was all aspects of gardening. We planted the seeds, we weeded and weeded and weeded, and then harvested.
Mm-hmm. And there was, yep, the garden would have been in between the house and the garage. It was a pretty good sized garden.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, there's a picture that we want to show about us gardening, and it's kind of a crazy picture. If I get to it right here.
Yeah. Page 173.
Okay, sure. Well, this was a picture from our book. It looks like Jackie and I are almost Siamese twins here, but we have we were weeding the garden, and those hats that we have on were very special hats. Jackie, do you remember where we got them?
Yes, from Dad's cousin, who happened to be an FBI agent, and he would travel the world, and he brought us back those hats from some I don't know. They were like those Chinese limpet hats. So maybe he got them in China, maybe he got them in the Bahamas. I don't know. But anyway, he was very thoughtful, and
Yes.
we received gifts from all over the world, thanks to Uncle Alvin.
Yes, and he never had been married, and so he probably thought of us perhaps as a little cousin, a little niece. Well, we were nieces, great nieces of him, weren't we? No, cousins.
Cousins, yeah.
Yes.
He was Dad's cousin.
Yep, and who it was just fun that he remembered us.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have them to wear those hats in the garden too. Keep that sun off. Okay, Jackie, what about the afternoon? What happened in the afternoon on our farm?
Well, morning, afternoon, or evening, we often helped Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And we assisted him when he needed a tool or whatever. And we always ran. He'd say, go get this in the shop or the garage. And so we ran because we knew he didn't have to tell us to run. We just knew that Dad had much to do during the day and his time was precious. And we respected that. And we wanted to help him. We loved working with our dad. So it was a real pleasure to assist him. It was a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I once had, well, of course, in our farming operation, we lambed. And I once had a vet ask me, why do you run all the time when you go do something? And I said, well, I guess I was brought up that way.
Yeah. And I still do it too.
Yeah.
I mean, why waste time walking when you can run?
That's right. How many of you viewers used to run to get things for your parents? That'd be interesting to know.
So in coming home from school, school was out at 4:00, and either dad or mom, one of them came to get us. It was only about 1.5 miles, 2 miles to our country school, which is in Menoken. And that's another story you could read from our book, too, about what went on there. But anyway, what I would do, and page 136, I'll just read a snippet of that. After school, I would change clothes, grab a snack, and jump on Lady's back. That's my horse, of course. If I had a tough day, Lady would listen to me intently for my rantings, and somehow I'd feel better. One time in my impetuousness, I decided to run away from home. I packed an apple and a peanut butter sandwich and a dish towel and hopped on Lady. Well, most of the time I rode bareback because it took too much time to mess with the saddle. So my favorite route was through one of the 4 shelter belts that we had. So by the time I'd ridden 1/4 mile, I felt better. And my reasoning kicked in, and I remember wondering why I'd even had such an impractical thought as running away. Where would I go? Well, besides, it was time to return to do the chicken chores. So sensibility.
Were you in this shelter belt up here?
No, I was in the one that you can't see. It's on the south. The one going north and south over to the other one.
This one?
Back up. No, the one that's not by the house. No, not the one beyond the house that's not there.
This one.
It's the one out by the field.
Okay.
That's the longer one.
Yep.
That's where I was when I came to my senses after I'd run away from home.
I wonder how many children did that. Got on their horse and just took deep breaths and relieved themselves for the day of being in school.
Or maybe they put things in their wagon and they just started walking.
Yes.
Then we better turn around.
Well, one thing that I remember too about coming home from school is just first off getting a snack. I think that might be true with many farm kids or kids who got home from school. It was just time to get a little nourishment to move on with the rest of the day. One thing that we would often do in the summertime, now this is not necessarily in a cohesive order, but when our cattle were up at another pasture, we called it the North Ranch or the North Pasture, which was southwest of Wing. The
20 miles north.
Yeah. We would go up there with a car, and I can remember in the 50s, of course, we had a 1957 Buick, and we would go up there and just go in the pasture where the cattle were. And once we found the cows and calves, we would just sit and they would come up to us. It was just very much a time of peace. And to make sure the cows were all okay, the calves were okay. We didn't have any issues with them. No, none of them were hurt. But I think it brought a softening to our day and to our week when we could just sit there in the presence of livestock, and the cows and calves seemed to be very content with us. That was an area where there were a lot of rocks in the land, and so it was very often we'd have to be quite careful when we drove in the pastures that we didn't get hung up on a rock. Unlike our farm near Menoken, we did not have any rocks, that's why Dad and Mom loved that piece of property so much, because there were no rocks.
Yep, it was flat.
And then not only you drive out and look at the cows and calves in the summertime, but we checked them all the time, whether it was home or at that North Ranch. And remember, Jackie, too, when we'd have people come to visit, relatives would come to visit, it didn't matter if I'm thinking of the Treby clan. It didn't matter if we were at their house or they were at our house. Always in the afternoon, we'd get in the car and go in the pasture, whether it be our pasture or their pasture, and look at the cattle.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of other people who grew up on a ranch or a farm did that as well.
And I think Dad loved all aspects of farming, and this was just a little cherry on the top of the cake, just to see them. Like our feedlot was right across from our house, and sometimes after dinner, he would go out there and he'd just kind of lean up on the fence. It was a white wooden fence, and he would just look. and just enjoy knowing and just enjoy those cattle, and and they would be curious, and so that they'd walk up to him and sniff him. Yeah, right there. That's where he'd stand, and
There's
that by
the
that.
house.
That's
There's
the
where
house.
he'd
Yeah,
stand.
yeah. And I think Mom had a feeling of peace also looking out there, because the kitchen sink and window were right there, and so when she would wash dishes, I could just see her just looking out at the cattle and just slowly wiping the pan, and
And I think it's interesting because recently you said to me, remember, Mom seemed to caress her dishes when she washed them.
She did, yes. And I just think when we moved from this shack, and so felt like she was living in a palace with this new house in 1952. It was, and so she was very appreciative. Didn't really say that, but I could certainly tell that she was. She was just so grateful for what she had.
Yes. Well, going back to the windmill, one of my favorite things about the windmill was drinking water right as it came out of the ground and out of the, I'm going to call it the spout. Oh man, it was cool and so refreshing. I just loved it. But I've always liked drinking out of a hose too, a garden hose. But that windmill really served a neat purpose for our family. It not basically provided water for the livestock, as we had a separate well for our house. But it was just, that's windmills kind of steady who you are, I think, because they're tall and they can just they do so much for the looks of the property. And I think it says a lot about a farm family who has a windmill that's in great repair and is working well. Now, one thing too that we would do in the evening, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, and I'll go back. Is turning off that windmill. Do you listen, viewers, remember that at all? Dad would always ask us about 9 o'clock at night when it was getting dark in the summertime. Either Jackie or me, we had to do two things. We had to either shut the chickens in the chicken house so that no varmints would kill them, and or we had to shut off the windmill. And we went over to one leg of the windmill, pulled down on that wooden handle, and that was the brake, and which stopped the windmill fan from turning round and round, and kind of brought everything back together so that there wouldn't be a start of that windmill at night. And by then, the water tank for the cattle and sheep was full, and everything was tucked in nicely for the evening.
Yep. So we told you about the Saturday morning ritual of cleaning the chicken house. Now, we also had a Saturday afternoon ritual. Had to do with washing and curling our locks. So on page 196, we'll give you a little bit of that. There was a Saturday afternoon ritual when we were little. One of us pulled a kitchen chair over to the white porcelain double basin kitchen sink. After we individually ducked our heads underneath the faucet of relaxing, warm running water, Mom placed a small amount of Breck shampoo into the palm of her hand and lathered it into our wet hair. Not many brands of shampoo were available for purchase in the mid-20th century, but it would not have mattered in our family because advertising told us that every lady of any age wanted to be a pert and pretty Breck girl, and we believed it.
And I'll continue on with that with my experience too after she washed up my hair at the kitchen sink. This is as well as on page 196, along with a picture of that's my first grade picture. And that's the hairstyle Mom would have both for you and me. I wonder if she knew there were more than one styles, but this one, evidently our hair responded well. So I said, sitting on the wiggly three-legged stool at the end of the kitchen counter peninsula, I underwent the most trying part of my beauty routine, pin curls. How many of you remember having your hair set with pin curls, folks?
And before that, though, he probably had a perm.
Yes. At Tony Perm, a Tony
Yeah.
Home Perm, yes. So I had not yet developed an attitude of patience for this procedure. By the time the salon session had ended, my head was completely adorned with pin curls, created with the help of Mom's left hand index finger and simple bobby pins. Then I was off to play and let the wind dry my hair. So anyway, it was something that we had to go through in order to look lovely.
Yes. So we'll tell you a little bit about our outside play and our inside play. Just a little bit. We won't be saying everything. But
Mhm.
our outside play was in the farmyard, of course. And the farmyard was our work yard as well as our play yard. So in the summertime, Janine and I used Dad's farm shop building. It had been the entry of our old house. And we pack our dolls, Sissy and Betty and Bonnie, into their buggies, and we trek across the yard from our house to the shop for an afternoon of play. And it was a lot cooler there, so that's why that worked. While they were napping, our dollies were napping, we create mud pies and cakes and decorate them with a vast array of farmyard weed seeds using jar lids as the pans. And I want you to know that there is a delicate balance between the proportion of water and the rich North Dakota soil to get the creations to have just the right texture. And then, of course, we bake them in the hot North Dakota sun. And that didn't take long at all to do that.
Right, right. Yes, they were so pretty. Some of those pies we'd make were so pretty,
Yes.
and I suppose we just eventually tipped the lid over and got the pan clean again or free of mud and started
Yeah.
over again. I don't know when you make mud pies. Is there a goal of for someone to eat them, or is it just a matter of creativity?
I think it's the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, indoors, we played Babs and Mabs. Now, how many of you played Babs and Mabs, and who in the world are Babs and Mabs?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, our doll play, I'm reading from page 182. Our doll play in the 1950s was influenced by the Lucille Ball Show. The location of our make-believe world centered in an apartment building, just as Lucy's and Ethel's did. Usually our real-life bedrooms served as those individual family residences within which Babs, who was Jackie, and Mabs, who was me, were best friends and stay-at-home moms. It was a typical theme and way of life for many women in the 1950s. Now, this is the best part, guys. We pretended that our husbands, Joe and Mike, were policemen. And of course, this was influenced by the show Dragnet on TV. These policemen were handsome, they were steadfast providers for our families. Ideally, when the boys came home from work, our babies were on their best behavior, our apartments were spick and span clean, and supper was on the table. Why weren't we just the best happy homemakers there were?
Yes.
Do you remember when we played with dolls downstairs, and
Mhm.
we did in Mom's high heels, and we on the cement floor, and we'd clomp along? And I really want to bring this up because it's just kind of heartwarming for me. Our basement had a poured cement foundation, or was a poured cement foundation, and we would have colored chalk. And so, that gray cement was not very attractive at all. So Jackie and I thought we should pretty it up a little bit. And because we had a little corner of the basement that was our indoor place where we played house. So we'd take the colored chalk and we'd draw scenes on the wall, especially it was a farm scene. And there, of course, we always had running water and septic system, but on this picture, we drew an outhouse because most people in our community had an outhouse to use. And so I do, a couple years ago when we were back in North Dakota and we stopped at the farm, we had not met the people who lived in our house. And of course, we sold our acreage off a number of years ago. So this was a new experience just to drop in and say, hi, I used to live here. I'm Janine Pfeiffer. And so I got to visiting with the lady of the house, and I said, do you I was telling her about this chalk drawing on the cement downstairs. And I said, do you suppose that drawing is still up there? And she said, well, I don't know. But she said, I'll take you downstairs. And I could see why she didn't know, because they have a lot of boxes and items pushed up against the wall. So it would be hard to discover that. But we went to the place. I knew exactly on the wall where it was. There it was. Our colored chalk drawings were still there. And it just gave me such a warm, fuzzy feeling, because I knew how upset Mom was when she discovered we had drawn on that cement. But the interesting thing is, as the years progressed and we no longer lived at home, she never erased those drawings. She could have washed them off with that cement. And I thought, man, that's really neat. That I wonder too if she would even go downstairs and look at those drawings sometimes in her widowhood, when she was perhaps reflecting on our family's life there. She was the only one living in the house at that time. But it's neat to know that a little bit of us, Jackie, you and me, still lives on in that house.
That's right. Yeah. Just like a fine piece of art.
Yeah, for sure. I should have taken a picture of it. I didn't think to do that.
You'll have to go back another time.
I guess. Yes. So anyway, we talk about playing Babs and Mabs and buggies. Oh, we put our babies in buggies, wouldn't we?
We did.
Yes.
That's how we trekked across the land, from the house to the shed. Mm-hmm. Yes, we each had a buggy.
Yep. And then as we got older, then we started doing some sewing, because we were getting in 4-H age then. Can you tell about sewing, our sewing experiences?
Our sewing experiences. Well, I think I could try to do that here. Kind of thought that, let's see, which part? Well, let's see. My first experience was hand sewing for 4-H. And I needed to make a rectangular floral dresser scarf. And I measured, this is my first year, so it was one of my first exhibits. So I wanted to have it just perfect. So I measured each stitch is hand hemmed. So I measured it with a hem gauge. And of course I got a blue ribbon. But what kind of disturbed me was this judge in her comments said, "This is so perfect. Are you sure you did this, or did your mother do it?" And I was insulted that she thought I would cheat. Yeah. I did not cheat. I just wanted to have them perfectly correct.
Good for you.
Yes, and I still have it. In fact, it's a fall print, and I have it on my dining room table right now.
Well, neat.
I can show it to you, but that's okay.
I tried to be as perfect as what I could be, but I didn't have that skill. You were the one that I looked up to in the sewing area, just because you always sewed things so beautifully and were awarded well for them through 4-H program. Well, I can tell you about my experience. One of my experiences in sewing was when it was a bloody hot summer and we didn't have air conditioning in our house, and so I was at the sewing machine. Mom was outside hanging up clothes, and I was working with plaids. Maybe one of my first experiences of working with plaids. It was a wool skirt, and of course, because it was wool, it just made working with it in our hot house even more frustrating to me. Well, I did the best that I could in trying to match the plaids on this side seam, but it wasn't picture perfect. So I knew what Mom would say, but I got up from the machine and took the skirt out and showed her what I had done. And I don't think I said anything to her. I just showed it to her. And she said, "Well, what do you think?" And I just wanted to go, "That's not the answer I wanted. I wanted you to say, that's fine." But it wasn't. So I knew I had to go back in and use my precious seam ripper, who was a great friend of mine, and to take out those stitches and rework that seam so that my plaids matched. And we had phrase in our family when our girls were in 4-H in working on projects, that persistence, perseverance, and patience. That's what we learned through the 4-H program. And I think that's a wonderful mantra to have as far as going for a child and even an adult in whatever you do.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the sewing machine, and I would like to let our viewers know it was a treadle Singer sewing machine. And so besides when you sew with a treadle, you need to get coordination of your feet and your hands and your head so that you don't run the needle through your fingers. But that took a little bit of time to coordinate.
Mm-hmm.
But, we learned.
Yes.
Then I didn't get an electric machine until I was a freshman in college.
It was a Christmas present, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm. Freshman year.
Yes, nice.
And I finished the college and I sewed and sewed and sewed.
Yes. Well, we have a few highlights from the evening responsibilities that on our farm, and one of which was turning off the windmill. Did I cover that already?
No, you did. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then
closing the house.
Yep. The chicken chores, of course, that would have been about between 5 and 6 o'clock when we fed chickens, we fed the 4-H calves and the cats, and we gathered eggs. And one thing that I remember, at one time we had about 40 cats on our face. And so we always fed them in these metal pans, these old metal cake pans that Mom no longer used. And from what I recall, we fed them bread, torn up pieces of bread, a lot that was soaked in dry milk that had been reconstituted in water. Well, let me tell you, when those cats come a running, because we fed them out by the chicken house, so will the chickens. The chickens will love that kind of food too. And so I remember sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, keeping those darn chickens away so my cats could have their feed. But it was I think I've always been one who's liked to have something going and do something all the time. So sitting there watching those chickens and keeping them away from the cats was kind of like watching paint dry for me. It was really boring. And then the 5-gallon bucket got a little mark on my rear after a while. But it's in closing. Do you have anything else, Jackie, you want to highlight?
Well, I wanted to say what the windmill says, and I also wanted to have you take a look at this. This is the windmill. It's the same. There are many styles of windmill. This was the style that we had. Yeah. And by reading the book, you'll find that this windmill is a metaphor for something.
Yeah. It not only talks, there's meaning there.
Right. So this kind of wraps up what the windmill says about the sisters at play. Imagine, and this is page 181. Imagination. That's what those Pfeiffer girls had. Actually, imaginative play was often typical for children in the Great Plains during the middle years of the 20th century. And he says, I often caught sight of the sisters whiling away the daylight hours with make-believe play, assuming adult roles as mothers and bakers and talented interior and fashion design artists. Now, I tell you, there wasn't a lot of whiling away the day because we were either working or we did creative play. We didn't say, Mom, I'm bored, because there was always something to do on the farm, whether it be inside or outside. And then later on, in our young childhood, we had piano lessons, so we had to do the piano. We would, on Saturdays, dust and vacuum. We kind of take turns of who's dusting and who is vacuuming. But it was great. Those chores, inside and out, were a great lesson. And I recently read somewhere that children who have chores and have responsibilities turn out to be better citizens. So there.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Yes, it makes sense. Well, in closing then, folks, we're so grateful that you got on board and journeyed with us through a somewhat typical day on our farm, or the experiences that we had on our farm near Menoken. I just want to point out that our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s, it has won an award. And you'll see that little white icon in the bottom right-hand corner there. That means the book received an award from the Independent Press. We have many of our books are autographed, pre-autographed, and by Jackie and me. And so if there's a gold sticker on the front, it'll tell that. But if you are interested in purchasing our book, it makes a great read going into the wintertime, especially if you have blizzarded in days, that's the time to read it. Or Christmas vacation, Thanksgiving vacation. It's a wonderful story of that time in America. Now, we are not on Amazon. Sometimes people ask us, is your book sold on Amazon? It is not, but it is sold now in over 40 bookstores and bookshops, coffee shops, museums across the USA, you might say. So if you are looking to find a place near you where the book is sold, we at our website, whilethewindmillwatch.com, it's running right at the bottom of your screen there, whilethewindmillwatch.com. If you go there, you could actually order that book right there online. There's a pink button. It's on every page, and so you won't miss it. And that it will take you directly to the NDSU bookstore, which is our international distributor. They will take your order. They'll ship it out to you, and it's so easy to do. So a great gift under $20 for you, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents. Just take a break and read the book and reflect on what life was like in the 50s. So, Jackie.
So, tell your friends, even your relatives, about this 1950s fun chat.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us. Till next time. Toodaloo.
Bye-bye.